Hello. Hi. How are we? So good news. 2023's book is fun and over. Well, this book started like June, July, August. I think by September. September. Wow. There's a lot since then. I think my first YouTube video was somewhere around there, and we've already at like 200, 300 videos. At this rate, I reach 1,000 sometime this year, right? No? Every month, 60 videos. 60 times 10, 600. Nah. Yeah, by the end of the year, I would have reached 1,000. Something intense. I wonder what they're going to be about. Fuck knows. But hey, number one, deja vu while reading. This one, today's video is kind of nice. Why? So I was reading a book. It's The Psychology of Money. I don't know if you guys know this book, but I have been reading quite a bit over the past, I think, 4 years. 2018 is when I started kind of like diving into myself and trying to understand just whatever I was trying to do. I was always trying to do something and it was always never working. Like I said, I closed 9 companies when I was in Liberia. 7 of them were between 2014 and 2018. I did a lot in those 4 years. And there was Ebola. I was switching my restaurant from one location to another. And there was a new government happening on that side. Like the country was small enough for like a change of government intentionally, like make a difference. Fuck, man. The United Nations, man, had a budget of $1 billion, I think, by like 2012. And by 2015, 16, it went down to like 300 million, which completely stagnated the economy just because half the people that were getting paid no longer got paid, no longer had a job. So, like, yeah, it was like the economy was small. I think government budgets were between like 50 to 100 million, the entire government's budget. Quite small, man. Like, one, let's look at it this way. The States alone on Ukraine has spent over $50 billion. That's just military funding on Ukraine. Our entire country, Liberia, back when I was there, the entire budget of Liberia was not even 2 buildings at a prime area in Lebanon. It's not even one building in Dubai, period, anywhere, right? So it's like that's basically the economy. But anyways, that at that point, man, I realized I was failing at a lot of things. And what happened was I kind of like started diving into like just trying to explore more mentally the concepts of the world because I felt like any decision I'm making was not really like supported by a strong essence, which is me. And so effectively, I started reading and researching in between articles and between just like random books and between like stories and Medium posts, all kinds of shit, like reading and reading and reading and reading. At first, most of what I did was lectures and notes on the lectures and financial journals and just like stuff that are more scientific. And then after that, I started diving into like the books, psychology. My favorite so far when it comes to like philosophers, I think they would call philosophers, is Kierkegaard, because he's the reason why existentialism started in all the cuteness. But anyways, so okay, the more you read, the more things start referencing each other because we all are standing on the shoulders of giants before us. People started something, and then basically we become original when we take it from there and create something on top of it or expand from the concept. And we can decide which giant we want, right? Like, but if you're gonna do physics, you're not gonna start before Isaac Newton started. You're gonna start with like the latest of the physicists or whatever. And the same with biology. Occasionally, though, you get like these people that kind of like recreate something from scratch in a much more like dynamic, better way and more interactive way. But that's a conversation for later. Maybe I should should take a note of it. But recreating something from scratch, actually, yeah, the Unreal Engine recreated from scratch. All right. So, deja vu while reading. Why this title? Because I was reading something and it felt like I read it before. It did. And so, effectively, what I did initially is basically I stopped and I tried to like search through my kind of like memory. if it's something that was there at one point or not. Uh, nope, I don't see it anywhere. Project proposal, philosophy of money, psychology of money. Uh, yeah, I haven't read it before, but it's funny because that book references a lot of stuff that I actually did, and it's a scientific book certificate. The points in history where things actually mattered differently when it comes to certain investors, certain people, just how different approaches towards investing, and it kind of like started clicking in my head, and I felt like I was reading something in a deja vu state. What happened at that point, I remember with me, was like I instantly like, other than considering whether the book is ready or not, or something that I read before or not, I effectively stopped and I was like, if this was my mind, deja vu is when your mind says, "Ah, I've seen this before." And the way they explain this effect is that your mind processes what you saw faster than you realize you saw it. And it got me thinking. As I read, I'm developing a better intuition towards reading. As I'm actually getting, because as you read, there are certain kind of like, what I noticed with myself is the more I read, the more I kind of like, I'm leveling up in focus. Because most of the times, especially at first, when I would be reading, I'd be reading and I realized I'd be kind of like reading and my mind would be thinking something else. So my eyes are doing the reading because my mind is used to kind of like, because I'm used to the letters, I'm used to the act of reading is different than the act of absorbing and understanding what you're reading. Anytime you look at something, and I think there was a scientific experiment at one point, like, all I have to do is for a split second put a bundle of words. What your mind does, it remembers the image, and then it takes these words and kind of like combines them together, and then brings them out of you. And then basically, what you do is, and it's funny because they put ice cream and they put poop, and instantly your mind would create an image of like poop in the form of ice cream, and everyone would be like, ah, and he would be like, aha, like the actual teacher. Like I should remember that YouTube video. But anyway, so like your mind kind of like is doing its thing. It's used to reading, so it's used to the words, so the words are kind of like easy to comprehend. And then it goes and it does its own thing, but you kind of have to like bring it back into focus in order to absorb properly. And I figured that is a skill I need to learn. But then as I actually now, it's easier for me to open a book and start kind of like focusing on a book and just be like, okay, I'm going to read 5, 10 pages. I have this much to read. I have 1 hour to read, whatever it is. Like that time is dedicated for the book. It's become easy. And it's become easy for me to do that as well towards anything. Like if I want to write, I'd be like, okay, there are 2 hours dedicated for writing. So it's kind of like easy for me to not think of anything else until those 2 hours are done. And there's definitely more efficient ways for me to kind of approach them, to start like thinking about them, to engage with them. And my entirety is kind of making it more fun to like be more effective and efficient with these kinds of engagements. The goal is to evolve and to level up. But the feeling of deja vu when I'm reading, and it happened on multiple occasions for me to stop and take the note. Because the first time I was like, feels like I've read this before. And then the second time it's like 3 pages later, I'm like, I feel like I read this before. So a part of me started thinking, what if a different level in reading is your mind looking at the page and kind of like processing it? That's the first stage of reading because most of the time you read just to see what's written. And the second time you're kind of reading to understand what's written. And maybe the more you read, as you become better at reading, then basically your mind starts creating an easier and faster process in how you engage with the information. So effectively, instead of reading something more than once or twice or 3 times in order for you to understand it properly, your mind is able to go through the first and second stages of reading in order for you to kind of like avoid the focusing part where you have to combine the sentences together to create the theme. And what it does is it basically like creates the theme for you just to understand why it's relevant, when it's relevant. And ultimately, remember, when we're reading something, we're reading we're reading something to see how we would want to use it to engage with the world through the understanding of how others engaged with the world through it. Whether it's a novel, because there are characters in the novel, and there are storylines, and there are different dramatic moments, and just kind of like situations, or whether it's a scientific journal, a fiction story, it doesn't matter. Like all of these are things that we look for these relationships with for. And we get to like look at how we would want kind of like, and why would you read a book if not to utilize it? If you're just reading a book to feel good, fuck yeah, man, good for you. But if you're reading a book to understand at a more, I don't want to say deeper level, I want to say more profound level. I don't think profoundness is depth. I think profoundness is the ability to like see everything in front of you instead of having to put in the effort to dig deeply. And if our goal is to be able to like understand reading better, then maybe our mind, what it does is it creates that whole like, you start actually creating the image of the entire page where you are able to read through that image as you look at the page, and your mind would be able to like kind of sew everything together and create the whole setup scene setting and ingrain it within your mental map and apply it to the things that relate to it. Because sometimes you're reading about money, sometimes you're reading about philosophy, sometimes you're reading about adventure, and sometimes you're just reading the news. And each one of these are pieces of information that need to go somewhere instead of just randomly going somewhere else. And I felt like the deja vu that I had while I was reading on multiple different like chapters and pages, which I am definitely going to test in the next book that I'm reading. But it felt like this is more of an intuition that's being developed, an intuitive response where my mind is kind of like understanding what our goal is from the process of reading, and it's kind of like becoming more effective and efficient in like distinguishing things and discerning them and kind of like removing them from their points and just kind of like allocating energy towards them as we're reading in order for us to be more effective and efficient and not having to go through it over and over again. It's a more fun way to focus. Cool. Thank you very much.